go about. So basically, I'll be discussing few objectives and going about to assessment, then medical management, and few results just with medical management. So here the objective is very simple. As plastic surgeons, as you are telling, right? As you are right, sir, Roy, sir. Basically, I think a lot of people have started doing hair transplant from other specialities, and we plastic surgeons are also are supposed to be the best among other specialties doing hair transplant. But the reason is basically, I think in last 10 years of my practice, I think the importance is we should know about basic trichology also. So just doing a transplant alone is not enough. So knowing about the basics in trichology is very important. We should know how to assess a patient properly, and what is the importance of medical management. I'm going to talk only about androgenetic alopecia, and whatever I'm talking today is all based on evidence on various consensus which has been published over the last few years. So in assessment, the first most important thing is history. We know that androgenetic alopecia is a clinical diagnosis, and with proper history, you can clinch the diagnosis. The most important thing with history is we should try to rule out some other causes which may be associated with androgenetic alopecia, particularly if the patient has got diffuse hair loss or telogen effluvium, which is associated with androgenetic alopecia. Then we should be in a position to diagnose and treat it in order to get an even better response. So getting a history is very important. And coming now to the next thing is basically in examination, we know that we have to see the density, we have to see whether it's a pattern type of hair loss or it's a diffuse hair loss, or if there is just some features of alopecia areata. Examine the scalp skin properly, look for other signs, and also look at the eyebrows and eyelashes to rule out other forms of alopecia, particularly scarring alopecia. We know about Norwood-Hamilton classification. I'm not going to go into the depth about it. But the classification which I started using over the last 2 years is basically this classification called as BASP. It's very useful. It's called basic and specific type of classification. The reason is, say for example, in the first picture A, if you see here, the hairline is maintained. He's just got a diffuse loss of hair over the front of the head. Putting this patient in a Norwood-Hamilton classification is quite difficult. And also following up, seeing the prognosis of the treatment also would be difficult. That's why I started using this classification, and it's really good, but I'm not going to go into the depth about it. One test which is of very important clinically is this test called as a hair pull test. It's basically nothing but you hold 50 to 60 strands of hair and just give a pull using slow traction. If you see more than 2 hair strands between your fingers, that means it's a positive hair pull test. And this is suggestive of a diffuse hair loss or a telogen effluvium, which is present along with androgenetic alopecia, or it might be seen in active form of androgenetic alopecia also. But this test is very significant. I think we should all start doing this test. It's quite simple to do. One another investigation which I started doing, and I've started having a lot of passion towards this, or getting to know more about it, is trichoscopy. I think this is very easy, simple tool which you can get, and it's very easy to do. And I would say it's a must know for any hair transplant surgeon. Basically, we can differentiate other forms of alopecia. We can use it for treatment follow-up and also as a tool during hair transplant. I will explain to you how. So this is one of my patients where this is a high definition trichoscope where I have used. And here you can see all the clinical signs of androgenetic alopecia in this feature, in this picture. Here you can see something called as hair density, hair diameter diversity, or it's called as anisotrichosis. It's nothing but you see different densities of hair in one particular area, or this we have taken it in the front. And if it is more than 20%, it is significant, it is suggestive of androgenetic alopecia. Then we have something called as a perifollicular pigmentation. You can see this pigmentation. I don't know if you're able to see it properly, but this is called as perifollicular pigmentation. This is suggestive of a lymphocytic infiltrate around the hair follicles, which is also one of the features in androgenetic alopecia. We know androgenetic alopecia has got a genetic factor to it, but it is also an inflammatory condition. And we see these yellow spots. These yellow spots are nothing but empty hair follicles. There was hair in this, but there is no hair right now, and it's filled up with sebum. So that is why you see them as yellow spots. This is also suggestive of androgenetic alopecia. And if you are able to see, these red hairs are nothing but other vellus hairs. So these vellus hairs are basically, if you are able to see the terminal to vellus hair ratio, and if it is less than 4:1, that is suggestive of androgenetic alopecia. So just by doing a trichoscopy, You can get to know all these points. More importantly, we can try to differentiate between other conditions which look clinically the same. For example, these two patients look clinically the same. Here, the first patient is androgenetic alopecia, and the second one is frontal fibrosing alopecia. Mind you, this frontal fibrosing alopecia is quite frequent, common among female patients who present with features suggestive of a female pattern hair loss. Here, this frontal fibrosing alopecia is a scarring alopecia. So just treating it like an androgenetic alopecia will not give you a result. So here, if you are able to do a trichoscopy, you can identify, again, you can see these vellus hairs. Here, you don't see any vellus hairs. And you can see the yellow spots, but here no yellow spots. If there are no yellow spots in trichoscopy, it means that it is a scarring alopecia. So you can easily differentiate with trichoscopy all these features. And I always use trichoscopy. This is the report which I give for all patients when I start the treatment, and we follow up regularly and we see how much of hair has gone into different phases, how much there is improvement, all those things. We can follow it up with a good trichoscope. And we can also use it during hair transplant. I think Dr. Rajendran will talk about it a little in depth, but what we do is basically we can calculate in the donor area, we can calculate how many hair follicles are 2, 3 and single, distance between the hair follicles, and the computer will generate you exactly how many hair follicles are there in each unit, in each square centimeter, and we can calculate exactly how much you need to use for the recipient area. Coming now to the investigations, see, androgenetic alopecia is a clinical diagnosis. We don't require any investigations. That's what all the consensus say. But if you're starting a patient on finasteride, if the patient is more than 40, 45 years, then we can do a PSA just as a baseline. And if you're suspecting diffuse hair loss along with androgenetic alopecia, then get other investigations to rule out the cause of diffuse hair loss. So coming now to the main topic of today, that is medical management. So this is how I treat a patient with androgenetic alopecia. I divide into 3 main pillars and 2 minor pillars. So 3 main pillars are stimulation, modulation, and nutrition. And the minor pillars are hygiene and lifestyle changes. So in stimulation, we have all these things. Basically, we have got minoxidil, we have got PRP, we have got low-level light therapy and mesotherapy. So we are actually stimulating the existing hair follicles. I'm not going to talk about all these things. This is more, we have read about this and we know that minoxidil still we don't know exactly how it acts, but there are new theories coming up that it's not only a vasodilator, it can even cause difference in the dermal papillary cells. So based on the consensus, this is what the treatment has been recommended. 5% is effective for men than 2%, and 5% twice a day at 1 ml dosage is the prescribed dose. So 2 to 3 hours is usual minoxidil action. After that, even the patient can wash his hair. But when you're starting on minoxidil, always it's important that you have to counsel the patient. If you don't counsel the patient before starting minoxidil, they won't continue it. And this has to be this will be a long-term process, and therefore you will have to counsel the patient. Tell them about the initial few weeks of increased telogen hair shedding, and it will take 3 months to see the reduced hair fall. And it will take another 3 months, that is 6 to 8 months, to see improvement in the hair density and growth. And when you stop the treatment, there will be hair fall after 3 months. And regarding side effects, basically contact dermatitis is very significant. I will be discussing about it a little shortly. PRP is something which everyone is doing nowadays. It's become a marketing gimmick. And if you take the overall consensus on PRP, still the efficacy has not been studied properly. The reason is not all PRP preparations are same. And we don't have a protocol which is standardized. And still we don't know regarding how much of interval should last between the injections. And we still don't know how much we should inject during PRP and what happens after you interrupt the treatment. So all these things require further study, and a lot of studies are going on. We still use it. It's effective. But if you take an overall picture on the literature available, still we are not able to standardize it. Low-level light therapy is nothing but using laser. There are a lot of studies on low-level light therapy, and it is effective as a combination therapy. I use along with minoxidil and finasteride. I have not used it as a monotherapy. Usually, it stimulates something called as a photobiostimulation. So all the stimulation treatment, basically what it does is, if you see the hair growth cycle, you got an anagen which is a growing phase and telogen which is a resting phase. We are trying to recruit hair follicles from the telogen phase by reducing its duration in the telogen phase and bringing it towards the anagen phase, and therefore you see more hair growth. This is what we do with all the stimulation. And then we have got mesotherapy, which is nothing but injecting all these different types of extracts which are available right onto near the hair follicles, either with microneedling or without microneedling. Again, we don't have a lot of literature on this. Each one gives their own ideas, but Still people are there. There are people who use it along with other forms of treatment. Next treatment part is modulation. So we know about finasteride. The finasteride is a 5-alpha reductase inhibitor which blocks the conversion of testosterone to dihydrotestosterone, which is the active form of testosterone, which will actually make your hair grow better or reduce the thinning. You know, it is a type 2 alpha 5-alpha reductase inhibitor. Dosage has been starting from 1 milligram to 5 milligram, and we have got topical finasteride now. Topical finasteride is being studied extensively, and there is a lot of good results from it. And minoxidil with finasteride, which comes as a spray, has got 0.1% finasteride, which is nothing but 1 milligram finasteride. And now recently we have got gels which contain only finasteride, which is 0.25% or 2.5 milligram finasteride, which has got even better response. So when we are giving finasteride, again counseling, you should try to get a full informed consent from the patient regarding finasteride. Explain to them, be transparent with the patient. If you are transparent to the patient, usually they follow up the treatment. And avoid the treatment in patients with infertility. Never coerce the patient to take it. There are sexual side effects with finasteride, like erectile dysfunction and loss of libido. But this has been blown out of proportion in all the various forums in the internet. And there is something, this term, which you will see always, called as a post-finasteride syndrome. This term has been coined by people, it's coined by people who are using finasteride. And then they have stopped using finasteride, but still they continue to have erectile dysfunction and sexual side effects. Still, there is a lot of research needs to be done, whether this is true or it is a fact or a fiction. Also, we should know about PSA screening, that basically when we are testing a patient for PSA on finasteride, we should do something called as a doubling of PSA to test. This is a very important slide. I think if this slide has been put across and if it reaches everyone, then I've done justice to this meeting. So this is something called as the micro dosing of finasteride. This concept is a very good new concept. It's not a new concept. It's been there for some time. I've been using it for last 5 years in my practice, and I found a good response. So basically, it has been studied and found out that 0.2 milligram per day is adequate to suppress DHT in the scalp skin. And 0.2 milligram per day will cause 60% DHT suppression near the hair follicles, whereas a 5 milligram causes 69%. So there is not much of a difference. So if you're able to deliver 0.2 milligram to the scalp skin, then it should have a good action. But it's not possible to give, there is only 1 milligram tablet available. How can you give 0.2 milligram? So there comes the pharmacokinetics of finasteride. So finasteride has got a tissue binding capacity of 4 to 5 days. So if you give 1 milligram today, for the next 4 days or 3 days to 4 days, at least a concentration of 0.2 to 0.3 milligram is present around the hair follicles. So that is the concept of giving finasteride 1 milligram on alternate days or even every 3 days. Giving them, this will give them a response. I have seen it and it gives response, and it doesn't have that much of a sexual side effect. Dutasteride is another group of drug which is type 1 and type 2. As we know, type 1 is present along the dermal papillary cells, so it gives even better response than finasteride, but there are sexual side effects. So the next concept is on nutrition. So here we know that androgenetic alopecia is a genetic condition. It has got an inflammatory component, but there are also other things which can be coexist with our androgenetic alopecia, which can all result in dysregulation of hair growth cycle. So just treating along just with minoxidil and finasteride is not enough. So you will have to treat them with some nutritional supplementation. So the different therapies are available. And usually I start them the first 4 to 5 months of the treatment. Usually I start with nutritional supplementation also. And then as and when required, usually I don't continue. But it is very effective if you start it along with the treatment. This next concept is on the next pillar, that is the hygiene. So studies have shown that scalp microbiome has been studied, and they have studied miniaturized and non-miniaturized hair. So if you take a miniaturized hair, and if they have compared what are the different types of organisms are present in the normal scalp microbiome. So in a non-miniaturized hair, they found that Propionibacter acne is present in a very less concentration. In a miniaturized hair, actually, if you can see, this green slab is basically the Propionibacter acne. You can see that much of Propionibacter acne is there in miniaturized hair. So this gives you a clue that androgenetic alopecia has also got an inflammatory component. So we should also try to maintain a good scalp hygiene in order to have a better result. So here ketoconazole comes to rescue. Ketoconazole has got multiple actions. So one is it has got an anti-infective, anti-inflammatory property. It inhibits Propionibacter acne's lipase activity, therefore it can reduce the concentration there. It is also weak DHT blocker. So using ketoconazole three times a week, 5 to 6 months, gives an additional edge towards your treatment. And of course, always treat the patient holistically. See that they stop smoking, see that they don't consume too much of junk food, let them go into good stress reduction methods, good nutrition, all these things. So all these things are very important. I'm going to discuss 3 common scenarios which usually I see during my practice. One, patients started on minoxidil, they come back with this. So this is something called as a irritant dermatitis or contact dermatitis or minoxidil allergy, as you can say. So here, this commonly occurs when patient is using minoxidil as solution, as a spray or a solution. So here, that is because this solution contains an ingredient along with the minoxidil called propylene glycol. So that might be the cause, or minoxidil itself can be a cause. So how to differentiate it? We can do a patch test and differentiate. So if we find out that propylene glycol is the cause, what to do next? So we can use minoxidil as a foam. Foam doesn't have propylene glycol. If the patient is not sensitive to minoxidil, then using a foam will give them better response. They can continue using minoxidil. Now, if the patient is allergic to minoxidil, then what to do next? Here, there are a lot of other secondary things like peptides and procapil, biohexidil, all those things are there. But there is studies now pointing towards this particular thing called as caffeine. Caffeine, supposed there are studies which show that it has got almost equal efficacy to minoxidil in treatment of in androgenetic alopecia, and I have been using for patients who are allergic to minoxidil, and it gives good result, or at least they maintain what they have obtained. Next is finasteride side effect. So patient comes when they come when they are not happy and they see erectile dysfunction. So first thing is reassure them. So usually you reassure, make them to continue the medication. Usually the side effect goes away. This is what we have observed. And in spite of that, if still they have it, then you can tweak the medication by using microdosing, or use minoxidil with finasteride as a spray, or we can use finasteride as a gel. This is the gel which I'm talking about. It's a new one and it's very effective. And if still they continue to have it, then you can stop it altogether. Then we have these kind of patients who are non-compliant and skeptical. Whatever you say, they will give you Dr. Google's reply. So they will have studied extensively. Now hair loss patients come with complete information from the internet. So you tell minoxidil, they'll tell side effects. You tell finasteride, they'll tell side effects. Then what we have to do is you have to give second type of second line treatment. This is what I would say. Just give them and use combinations of PRP, laser, or nutritional program in order to maintain that. But it's very difficult to manage these patients. So I'm just going to briefly show you certain pictures. So usually what I do is I ask the patient to start the medication. I ask them to send WhatsApp picture every 1 month or every 2 months, and usually they send them. See, this patient started just with minoxidil and finasteride spray, and you can see actually he had no hair for 15 years. And then after he started minoxidil and finasteride, you can see that much of growth has come. Still the hairline is not there, but he's happy with it. So another one of the patient where we can see the monthly, he has sent me the pictures of what kind of result which can come with the minoxidil finasteride application. So these are all my patients which we do like a combination where minoxidil finasteride, PRP, along with sometimes mesotherapy. And here, this is the result after a period of around 8 months. You can see there is increase in the hair density, increase in the hair thickness, just with medical treatment. And you see another patient with good result with the medical management. And you can see there is good result even in the crown vertex region with medical management. So if you are able to give results with medical management, that means 1, the patient is compliant. Second, you have counseled them properly. Only if we do these 2 things, if these 2 things happen together, then they will continue the medical treatment. Otherwise, it's not going to end. See, medical treatment is going to be a long-term process because hair loss in a male is going to be a dynamic process. So we will have to continue medical treatment. And that is why we will have to talk to the patient, explain to them what is possible, what is not possible. It will also help you in giving you a better edge in your hair transplant results. And we should proceed, and it should also follow your hair transplant. So this is what I would like to explain to you or try to convey with this my presentation. Thank you so much.
Very good, Dr. Vikram. We have touched upon all the points. Maybe just for the benefit of everyone, how long the medical management should continue?
So that is a question which usually we get as soon as you tell the patient you start medical treatment. So that is a question you get. So my answer to that is as long as he wants hair. So actually we cannot exactly tell them exactly how many days it is required. So now what has happened is, what I do is now usually I start them for at least a year with all the things like basically minoxidil, finasteride, and sometimes with PRP also. And then after a year, usually I start reducing the dose of finasteride and then try to stop it and then use just minoxidil and ask them to continue. See, we can stop finasteride for a period of at least 2 months or 3 months, because usually the minoxidil's complete washout, the finasterade's complete washout from the system takes 3 months. So they can stop, then again they can restart, but they will have to continue because androgenetic alopecia is a dynamic process and they will continue to lose their hair once they stop the medical treatment, sir.
Yeah. When you start a minoxidil for the first time, patients come to us and saying that after starting this, they find the hair loss is more. I think you can explain it physiologically.
So basically what happens is, this is called as a telogen hair shedding. So that is the actual thing which happens when you start on any form of stimulation. Even sometimes it happens in patient when you just do PRP. So what happens is, when these hairs, if you see the hair cycle I was trying to explain, you got telogen, anagen and catagen phase. So in the telogen phase is nothing but the hair is in the resting phase. So when we start on medical treatment, when we stimulate the hair in telogen phase, this hair usually falls. So this is called as telogen shedding. And it's just the hair which is falling, and the root which is getting stabilized and it is becoming stronger is entering into the anagen phase. So actually they are responding to treatment. That's how we try to put them. You just tell them that they are responding to treatment. Usually they continue. Otherwise they will not continue, sir.
Yeah, all these points need to reassure the patients. Otherwise they will discontinue. And recently, what is your opinion about Botox and hair stimulation?
I have not used Botox, sir. Micro Botox is something which they have started using for hair, scalp, or micro Botox for the scalp. But I have not used it. I don't have any views on that, sir.
Because Botox is commonly available, maybe we should try whether it is really effective. Another, I think you mentioned about PRP. What is your opinion about the stem cells?
Sir, I have not mentioned about few other things where for the want of time, I have tried nanofat also for hair by using adipose derived stem cells from nanofat. But I have not done many cases, and so that's why I'm not able to give you the exact opinion about it. But I've tried it, and I've also used something called as Regenera. So Regenera is nothing but using the skin and trying to take the epidermal stem cells, and we can also try to use it to stimulate the hair follicles. So there are a lot of studies which show that they give good response, but since I have not done many patients, I would not be able to comment on exactly how good the response is.
Yeah, very good. See, coming to the investigation in a case of hair loss, what are the must-do investigations you will recommend?
Sir, are we talking about general hair loss, or are we talking about androgenetic?
Androgeneity.
Sir, usually in androgenetic alopecia there is not much the role of investigations as such. So if we are just thinking about the diagnosis part of it, we know it is androgenetic alopecia by just looking at it. So if at all we are going ahead with the medical treatment, and if you see that there is an associated telogen effluvium or a diffuse hair loss along with androgenetic alopecia, then we have to investigate them. So usually we can do all types of, like from blood hemoglobin to vitamins and all these things, which particularly vitamin D, vitamin B12, iron, ferritin, and hemoglobin, all these, and thyroid. Rule out any endocrinological abnormalities also. So these things will help you to treat diffuse hair loss. So androgenetic alopecia, still our treatment remains the same whether we investigate or don't investigate.
Maybe if any questions I can put forth to, there is a role of biotin in medical management. Somebody has asked about that. So
basically biotin is something which every tablet which has been available for hair and skin, usually you see biotin is there. It's basically a type of a vitamin which is used for hair. And usually I don't just give biotin alone. So what kind of a treatment we use, I commonly use something called as a cyclical nutritional program, where we cycle different kinds of nutrients at small dosages at different intervals. So for example, if you give iron and calcium on the same day, it chelates, and then you don't have absorption of both iron and calcium. So you'll have to give iron on one day and then calcium on another day. And particularly same is true with different types of vitamins. Taking just vitamin A every day will cause more hair loss than hair growth. So there are so many other combinations which we have to take. There comes biotin also. Just using biotin alone, I was using it initially, but nowadays once I started this nutritional program, I find the results are much better than just using biotin alone.
See, all these nutritional supplement, how effective in a case of androgenetic alopecia?
See what happens, sir. Basically, it is very effective. Usually, we can never, segregate, or it's difficult to segregate just androgenetic alopecia, just diffuse hair loss, and telogen. All these things are usually associated with each other. We have patients with androgenetic alopecia who are not taking proper diet, and they can continue to have hair fall, even if you try to retain the hair with the medical management for androgenetic alopecia. So always, initial, at least the first 3 to 4 months or 4 to 5 months, if you are able to substitute with a nutritional program along with this minoxidil and finasteride, it gives a better response just by instead of just starting with minoxidil and finasteride. And then after a year or so, again we can repeat.
Okay, good. I think Professor GK wants to ask a question. You can ask straight away.
Yeah, that's a nice presentation, Vikram. I just wanted to know, when a patient presents to you with androgenetic alopecia, do you decide on this patient is going to have a medical management and this patient is going to have a surgical management? Or is medical management the first step for any patient?
Sir, very good question, sir. See, basically, when a patient comes for androgenetic alopecia, first we'll have to take a proper history. We'll have to assess him, what grade of baldness he is in. And we have to see what's the patient's age. We have to look into the family history of the patient. It's very important that you see that if father is having grade 7, grade 8 baldness, and this fellow is only 20 years old, and he is bound to have that kind of a baldness later on in his life. So basically, we have to educate them that this is going to happen somehow or other. So whether taking a good medical treatment and continuing it for almost till he wants hair is very important. So that is one thing which is important. So usually, sir, when I usually don't start with hair transplant right away. So usually when I see the patient for androgenetic alopecia, I give them medical management, see that the hairline is stabilized, see that they have good kind of thickness improvement in the frontal region. So these have two things. One, the patient, you gain confidence of the patient. So they will be a good candidates for you. They will exactly follow what you're telling. So you have a good confidence. Second thing is, sir, there is something called a shock loss. Shock loss is a phenomenon which happens when you do transplant. Sometimes when you do a transplant and the patient suddenly loses hair in the area which is not transplanted. So that is shock loss. It can even happen in the donor area. So this shock loss is very much reduced if the patient is on medical treatment before and then you transplant and then continue the medical treatment after. So the shock loss, the incidence of shock loss, because if a shock loss happens, the patient becomes very apprehensive and then they will sit on your head. So basically we can try to help them out before that. So I usually decide on patients based on what kind of scenario they present. If they require a hairline is a must. And whether you do a medical treatment or don't do a medical, hairline is a must, and the time is limited. So usually they come just before 1 year before marriage, they want to create a hairline and then they go ahead for the marriage. In those patients, we can try doing hair transplant, explaining to them exactly that the need for medical treatment too. But otherwise, if you have time, sir, then the best thing is to start medical treatment and then go ahead with the hair transplant later on.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Sir, James, sir.
I think sir got disconnected.
Okay. Now there is one question in the chat box. Another question.
Yes, sir.
Should we do sperm count, etc., before finasteride treatment, as the patient may have it before treatment and blame us for it?
Actually, so as I was telling you regarding the incidence of sexual side effects that's associated with finasteride, there was a beautiful article which I came across recently, where they have studied patients, different age groups of patients. They have taken particularly 25 to 35 age group, where they have identified that patients taking finasteride and patients not taking finasteride, and they have identified that the patients, even those patients who are not taking finasteride, still have a lot of sexual side effects. Actually, it is even more than patients who are taking finasteride group. That was a very interesting article. There's a lot of small nuances in that. But it's actually not necessary to do a sperm count for all patients who are coming with finasteride. That will create more apprehension than actually help you in treating the patient. So basically, we tell them exactly, we tell them this is going to happen, this might happen, but if you stop, see, when we stop finasteride for 2 weeks later, then the sexual side becomes normal. 3 months later, the drug is completely washed off the system. There is no need to actually panic, sir. But if you reassure them, most of the times, 99% of the times, they will continue taking the medication. That is what I observed.
Okay. That the question came from Dr. Alexander George.
Okay, sir.
Sir, Dr. Alexander, has your question been answered? And now there is another question from Dr. Narayanamurthy.
Yes,
Is
sir.
the nutritional supplement program same for males and females? And the second part of the question is, do you stop minoxidil before transplant? And when do you stop before surgery? And when do you restart?
So there is, regarding the nutritional program, there is a slight difference between the nutrients which are there. So usually this comes as a box where we contain different kinds of, all the different nutrients are there in different small boxes, and we ask the patient to take based on a different combination each day. So there is a slight difference between the male and the female, not a big difference. And regarding the stoppage of minoxidil just before hair transplant, usually I stop minoxidil at least 2 weeks, 10 days to 2 weeks before transplant. The reason is basically when the patient continues to use minoxidil, sometimes we have observed a lot of oozing when we take the hair follicle. So that is why we stop minoxidil. Otherwise, there are people, I know a lot of people in the West who continue minoxidil even during the hair transplants. So it depends exactly on what you want.
Okay. And then there's a question from Dr. Selva Sitaraman.
Yes, sir.
He asked, when the patient is about to get married, what is your take on finasteride in such patients?
Don't give finasteride. Don't give finasteride when the patient is getting married. So basically, it is not about the finasteride. Finasteride might not cause anything, but the thing, he will go and read the internet and you'll have vague ideas. So I think it's best not to give finasteride when the patient is getting married. And you can substitute with minoxidil finasteride as a topical application during that time, and the patient can then come back after he's completed his duty after his marriage, and then he can come and start finasteride again.
Okay. Now, Dr. Chandran is here with us. Dr. T.C. Chandran, sir. Sir,
Yes,
can we have your comments also, sir?
Hello, everyone. Thanks, GK. As a matter of fact, I have practically stopped doing hair transplants because of so many other reasons. Now, the most important reason, as rightly pointed out by Roy, that I don't want to compete with the beauty parlors. And unfortunately, most of the younger colleagues seem to be doing hair transplants with the help of technicians. I'm really sad about it, but unfortunately, that seems to be the fashion of the day. So I'm a little off from this subject, but that was a very good presentation, Vikram. I really liked it.
Thank you, sir.
And thanks for bringing out that there is a medical management. But only one thing I'm a little apprehensive is that of PRP. I feel that PRP is not yet scientifically proved. And I'll be a little reluctant to jump into the PRP bandwagon. I don't know what the others feel about it, but otherwise everything is very, very clear. Finasteride, when I was using it, yes, there was certainly some side effects. Some people have come and complained, loss of libido. And certainly I'm very reluctant to use that. Topical, yes, certainly it will be preferable option. But PRP, I'm a little reluctant to use it.
Thank you, sir. I think Dr. Roy Kanjur is back, sir. Hello. Okay, while he is getting back, one more.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. You were you able to follow the discussion, sir?
Yeah, I could follow with the phone. Certainly,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay, sir.
Good thing you took over, Dr. Karthikeyan. I think all the questions are almost answered.
Can I
Anything
ask
more?
one more question, sir?
Yeah.
I don't know. We were discussing actually, some patients ask for an immediate effect. Is it possible with medical management? I mean, they say hair transplant takes time for the hair to grow. As somebody was asking before marriage, just about to get married, is there any role for medical management, any other methods?
There is no magic in
Magic treatment.
any because medical management cannot produce an overnight result. That is what we have to impress the patient. Time frame. Any hair, nail, skin. It takes minimum 6 months to show the results.
Yes,
We
sir.
have to make them understand. Any answers, Vikram?
No, sir. No, nothing is immediate with hair. So they will have to. That is why we will have to have a good rapport with the patient, and once you develop that rapport with the patient, then they usually, because they are going to keep on seeing you every 2 months to 3 months, and then they will always complain that this much is there. So if you are able to take good photographs, and that's when trichoscopy came into the picture, and nowadays I'm able to convince them at least they are able to see some diameter increase in the trichoscope, then they are happy. Then they usually continue before they are able to see clinical results.
The time factor is there for any procedure in plastic surgery,
Yes.
not
Sure.
necessarily hair.
Yes. Okay.
Dr. Venkatratnam has come saying that hair extension, that is a kind of a, hair wig, hair extension, all those things are immediate results shown with that, but they are all not permanent. That can be used to for a function, to get over a function. You can use this hair extension, wig. All these things are actually, when I was in Dubai, the Yemenis, they are very good in hair extension. It is very difficult to make out that they have done hair extension.
Yes, sir.
Roy, what are the risks of traction alopecia in such cases?
Yeah, that is, we have come across some incidences where in the temporal area, because of the hair extension, it has gone for alopecia. You are very right, Doctor, because the extension gives a real traction to the root. Have I answered you, Dr. Professor Chandran?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, sir. Have you? There are.
Maybe the gray hair and the hair dyes. What does it? Does it have any effect on the hair loss or hair restoration? Gray hairs and
No, sir.
Vikram?
Actually, gray hairs, they don't have any impact as such on hair transplant. It just looks like any other hair follicle. In fact, we have seen during our transplant, we usually see that gray hairs are even much better in thickness compared to black hair, same patient. But the thing is, basically, when we do gray hair, when the patient has got gray hairs, we should always try to explain to the patient that we do a transplant, the hair is going to grow gray. So they will always ask you one thing, that is basically, sir, karupu mudi muttu enakku eduthu vechirunga sir. That is what they will ask. So the thing is, basically we should try to explain to them that gray hair will still remain gray, or it might grow gray later on. As such, regarding the treatment for canitis or graying of hair, there are a lot of treatment protocols which are there in the market, which even I have tried, because I had been having premature graying for a very long time. But I didn't find much of a use with the treatments there, sir. So actually, I don't recommend anything to my patients.
Anything more, Professor Karthikeyan?
There is just one
We
more
are-
question on the chat box, sir.
One more, that is, yeah. When you stop minoxidil or finasteride for 1 year and stop for 2 weeks and restart again, whether it will take another 6 months for the treatment to take effect?
Yes, because this, as I was explaining, this is based on the hair cycle. So we have got anagen phase, catagen and telogen phase. For the hair follicle, from the telogen phase to go into the anagen phase, it would take 3 months. And for the hair growth to be seen outside visibly, it would take another 3 months. So 6 months for you to see a visible difference in your scalp. So that is why when we stop minoxidil also, it would take 3 months for the effect to go down. So it's all based on the hair cycle. So immediately you cannot see any result. So we will have some that 3 months, at least 3 to 6 months is what we should tell the patients.
Even when we restart it.
Even when we restart.
So
if
better-
the patient is just, I don't understand the question. If the patient is just off for 2 weeks and then we restart it again, then that's not an issue. But if we
Right.
stop more than 3 months, then again you restart it, again it will take that much time.
Yeah, he has asked 2 weeks and restart again.
No,
Yes,
that's not an issue. It won't
It will
have
not produce any problem. Yeah.
2 weeks is not at all an issue.
Okay, sir. If there are no more questions, can we wind up, James, sir?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. And interesting thing about Dr. Vikram is he's also doing a study on ergonomics for surgeons. I mean, that sounded very interesting. Vikram, would you like to say something about that?
Sir, this ergonomics is something I think Rajendra and me have been very fond of for the last 8 years or so. When we started doing hair transplant, we did the first hair transplant around 200 grafts for 8 hours. So that is how we did the first hair transplant 10 years back. And then slowly we started improvising. The thing is, when we started doing it, we started developing a lot of neck pain, and particularly the shoulder region and the neck. That's how it started to get tiring, because Chandran sir was telling about technicians doing transplants. We don't have technicians. So far, I have never done a hair transplant with technicians. It's me and Rajendran, and we do the process A to Z. There is no other, we don't have any technicians. Actually, we do transplants in places where we have done it in Nagaland too, where there is no trained, trained nurses also. So the thing is, so when we were doing it, we were observing that there was a lot of issues regarding the neck and the shoulder. So we redesigned the chair, we redesigned the table for the patient. So it was all good. And now there is not much study regarding, I was just checking out regarding the ergonomics, and I was finding extensive studies on dentists. There are a lot of studies by the dentist on ergonomics, not much study from our aspect, like hair transplant, microvascular surgeons on ergonomics. So right now the study is basically, it is clinical, that is questionnaire based. The second thing is based on the photograph, and 3 is I'm doing an EMG also to study the neck muscles and the trapezius. I'm just trying to see which is getting activated. It's very preliminary, sir. It will take time.
Good, good.
Anyway, good start.
Thank you, sir.
Good, thank you.